Magandang araw po sa lahat. Ito ang ika-12 ng Setyembre taong 2025. At unang-una, aking nais panggitin po ang aming apologies for being absent for many weeks. Dahil po kami nanggaling sa Cebu Forum, anti-war, anti-missile, anti-US bases and prosperity for peace forum sa Cebu itong nakaraang mga linggo. At sa susunod na linggo naman tutuloy kami sa Davao City Forum with a similar forum with the Davao media, NGO community and youth and students. We'll be using English in our communication here because we have some international viewers and reporters who join us live or post live. So today our subject matter is, of course, as usual, the Philippines in the geopolitical stage, and the situation of the Philippines relative to the international developments. And the past weeks, the past week and a half has been very significant geopolitically, which the Philippines and Filipinos have not been giving enough attention to, understandably because of the internal turmoil in the country facing the Marcos government and the US proxy strategies in the country. But the Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies Institute is obliged to continue pursuing its focus on the situation of the Philippines relative to the changing geopolitical conditions. We are at a historical stage, of course, where humanity is transitioning from 500 years of colonialism and unilateralism to a new world of multilateralism, multipolarism. And this is what we will be focusing on today. Now, I will read a situationer that I prepared for our discussion today, followed by a one-page press statement from our institute on what the Philippines should be doing given the situation that the world finds itself in. And finally, our colleague, Adolfo Panginoon to my right, will be presenting his paper, Changing Geopolitics in East Asia, being Marcos's absurd prep works for war in Taiwan, which has been a controversial issue also between the Philippine government and the People's Republic of China. And so I will proceed with our situationer as the background to our press statement, which is actually very concise. The situationer is more extensive, and it's entitled Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS, or Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, plus partnership, and the Global Governance Initiative, the Philippine Dilemma. The Philippines is presented with a crossroad again here, where the SCO and BRICS and the global majority is pursuing a new world order and guided by the Global Governance Initiative proposed by China. Will the Philippines stay stuck where it is today, or move with the global majority towards a better future for all? Okay. The SCO BRICS governance for a new, just, multipolar world. By the way, this paper you can access in the website. In the first week of September 2025, human history crossed a momentous threshold that changes its destiny for the next 100 years. India joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Tianjin Summit with China, Russia, Indonesia, and a dozen other global South countries, representing nearly half the world's population and 30% of the global economy. in affirming the unity of the global majority and a global governance initiative for a people-centered, multipolar world based on international rule of law. So, in short, in very brief snapshot, the basis for this SEO and this global governance initiative are the core concepts of sovereign equality, meaning all nations, big and small, are equal and speak as equals, international rule of law versus the American rules-based order. International rule of law is the UN-based rule of law. Let's scroll down a little. Multilateralism, people-centered approach to all issues involving nations and relations of nations and production of real results. So what has excited the world about this SCO meeting is finally India crossed the Rubicon and showed its solidarity with Russia and China, as well as Indonesia, Iran, and the other major countries in the South SCO. Just days following the SCO Tianjin summit, the BRICS Plus Economic Partnership, presently under the chairmanship of Brazil, President Lula da Silva, called an emergency virtual summit of leaders to address the escalating trade tensions with the United States. The summit was attended by the leaders of all the major countries of all the continents of the world: Africa, Latin America, Middle East, Asia, Europe, Eurasian continent. BRICS now supply around 40% of the world's oil, gas, and renewable energy. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization and BRICS now have respective banks and are building alternative non-US dollar trade and currency exchange systems. Ending the unipolar world order of proxy wars and regime change chaos is the unstated part of the goals of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and BRICS, and avoiding recurrent geopolitical crisis created by unilateral actions of the collective West and its overarching superpower, the United States of America. The success of the SCO and BRICS under the shepherding of major multipolar powers China, Russia, India, Iran, Indonesia, and other members and partners can be seen in the most recent pronouncement of the U.S. backing away from confrontation. The next slide. This is a report from Politico and reported by very many Western media, press. This is dated, can I see it dated? Just a few days ago, 2 or 3 days ago. In fact, I think September 3, on the day of China's victory, 80th anniversary of the victory over fascist Japan parade. There it is. This is September 5, 2025. Let's go up and look at the headline again. Pentagon plan prioritizes homeland over China threat. This is now all over the Western press. Pete Hegseth, U.S. Defense Secretary, announced that America will be shifting its forces, its interests, its concern, its focus away from China, the China threat, and focusing on homeland security in its own hemisphere, the Western Hemisphere. And that is why you see these performative, so far, actions aimed at Venezuela and other Latin American countries. Now let's go back. So that's the situation internationally. Now let's go to the Philippines. The Philippines, of course, the title of this segment is The Philippine Crisis in September 2025, which we are seeing today and we're feeling today, and the U.S. unipolar world. The Philippines in September 2025 reveals a country in shambles, as we can all see today. We were just discussing the many numerous rallies that are already being announced in the next 2 weeks here in the Philippines. I just got a text that the Forbes Park community, the super rich community in the Philippines, is on alert for possible targeting of the community by these marches. So, the country is in shambles, politically fragmenting, where the Dutertes versus Bongbong Marcos, anti-American versus China, anti-China, and so on. GDP per capita falling behind the original ASEAN 5, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Out of the original 5 ASEAN members, the Philippines is performing last. Facing security threat travel advisories from South Korea, US, Australia, China, Japan, resulting in the worst performing tourism sector in the region in ASEAN. And facing resurgent insurgencies and the growing threat of security tensions born of US imposed strategy of tension. And an exploding social volcano brought about by the runaway corruption of political leaders. Through 2016 to January of 2023, 2016 to January of 2023, 7 months into the new administration of Bongbong Marcos, the country was unified, carrying the banner of a sovereign and independent nation led by the Marcos Duterte UDP. The economic recovery from COVID-19 continued, and the diplomatic legacy of Duterte and the Duterte administration carried on into Marcos's first state visit to the People's Republic of China and signing with President Xi Jinping the Memorandum of Understanding for $23 billion of aid and investment. Everything was going smooth and well for the nation. May seats dito. Delphine, pwede mong lagay ng upuan dyan. However, on February 2023, the U.S. unipolar power imposed its will on the Philippines with the complicity and betrayal by the Marcos government and its proxies. A grim turn for the worse for the Philippines ensued. To understand this, we need to flash back to 2015. This next segment is betrayal and the Philippine crisis unfolds. Now, we'll first flash the 2015 press release from the Senate of the Philippines. Can we scroll down? Yeah. So this is an official press release from the Senate of the Philippines in on November 10, 2015. And the title is Senate, EDCA is a prohibited treaty. Voting 15-1-3, 15-4, the resolution of Senator William Defensor Santiago. Voting 15-1-3, senators on Tuesday adopted Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago's resolution expressing the strong sense in the Senate that, absent the concurrent enhanced defense cooperation agreement, is a treaty prohibited under the Constitution. So it's important to flash back to this. And besides Santiago, below you will see highlighted in yellow, those who voted in favor of the resolution declaring the EDCA agreement a prohibited treaty under the Constitution were Senators Sonny Angara, Nancy Binay, J.B. Ejercito, Chief Escudero, P.G. Gingona, Lee Tolape, Loren Legarda, Bongbong Marcos, Sergio Osmeña, Coco Pimentel, Grace Con, Ralph Preto, and Cynthia Villar. So this is an important recollection of the precedent to what followed from that. So, however, 8 years later, in February 2023, the Bongbong Marcos government announced 4 new U.S. bases in the Philippines, signaling a basic shift from the country's independent foreign policy and neutrality to a U.S. embrace or U.S. pivot with dire political economic consequences. The Marcos government submitted to the Bongbong Marcos in particular, government submitted to the U.S. quote-unquote rules-based order and its strategic goal of quote-unquote containing China, as well as containment of Asia and the disruption of the Asian century. The Marcos priorities became column suppression of the independent foreign policy of the Philippine Constitution and necessarily the political leadership that espouses it. Paragraph, open parenthesis, hence the vilification and persecution of the Dutertes, close parenthesis. Slander of China using the South China Sea dispute through provocations and propaganda, and isolation from ASEAN and global majority multilateral engagements. So we now go on to the Get Sara, Get Duterte, Get China campaign corruption connection. Now, this of course is the core of the social volcano issue today. The corruption for impeachment, the corruption for persecution of Sara and Rodrigo Duterte, the kidnapping, the corruption for the kidnapping of President Duterte to The Hague. And to let us recall the debate between Toby Tiangco and the Bongbong government represented here by the spokesperson and published as on June 18, 2025, just a few months ago, where the House congressional spokesman insists no solo pay forced to sign the impeachment case in the Get Sara campaign. Yeah, malinaw yung now, of course, just a few months later, we're now in September. This is just June. The lie is already completely exposed. And there you have the Tiangco. If you can scroll down again so that we can read what he says. Meron pa ba sa baba? Joshua? Yan. Tiangco. Conditional release sa budget ang dahilan ng impeachment kay VP Sara. And yan po ang ngayong sumasabog na over 1 trillion na scandal and controversy. So ang ugat po nitong massive corruption na to ay American strategic objectives for the Philippines and for the region, and Bongbong Marcos and his cabal, Martin Romualdez, Ivo Isidoro, Congressman Saldico, collaboration with the Americans. And the priority of the Bongbong government just focus on the Get China, Get Sara, Get Rodrigo Duterte campaign and crusade. And this was used as an open gate by the congressional politicians and some senators, and of course civil society of the proxy American type and so on, to loot and fund this anti-Sara, anti-China campaign and so on. With the unified U.S.-Filipino proxy strategy to pursue U.S. proxy war against China and Asia set, all proxy assets and financial resources in and of government were placed at its disposal. U.S. proxy senators raised the anti-China scare. For example, Hontiveros on Pogos, Lacson on the non-existent Chinese spy sleeper cell, which he had been yapping about since 2020. 5 years later today, there is not a single Chinese spy they have shown the public. House committees were sick on Sara. Inatake si Sara Duterte and the independent bloggers. The Sara impeachment funded by massive budget insertions, bribes. Rodrigo Duterte and then was kidnapped to The Hague. Independent think tanks like our think tanks were called to the TRICOM, featuring our superstar on the security aspect of the Get China campaign. The Philippine National Security Establishment's key U.S. proxies were mobilized to execute the U.S. Office of Naval Research, Gordian Knot Center for National Security Innovation, crafted Project Museum, again, a refresher course on what the American plan was. I will show you later. And its assertive transparency strategy to exact reputation cost of China. Scroll down na natin dun sa sea light image. Using the Philippine Coast Guard and Philippine Navy provocations, inviting Chinese Coast Guard response to megaphone across the Western and Philippine media. Note that Philippine maritime assets were used for U.S. aims. Now scroll down further please so we can see the entire photo. So that is the sea line, which is one of the fronts of the Operation Yushu. Hindi ko na babalikan unless there are questions later on. We can go back. This Operation Yushu was introduced to the Philippines in February of 2023 din. Kaya po yung 2023 February, a very significant month, two years ago. Itong plano well, I cannot explain all the details, but I'll briefly go back to it. The Office of Naval Research set up a group, it is called the Sea Line, to operate a strategy of vilification of China. This strategy is assertive transparency strategy, which was presented to the Filipino think tank ADRI, Albert de Rosario Institute, in February of 2025, where Tadela is, of course, ADRI, Carpio, and so on. And well, here's a summary. The objective is to deter and defeat down People's Republic of China gray zone activities when they are the ones operating in the gray zone with these non-military, non-kinetic actions, but really propaganda and so on. And so on and so forth. Strengthen national resilience of the Philippines by providing more and more and more arms, ships, and so on. Build international support for the Philippines cause against China, which of course today is still absent. It has not been achieved. Not a single ASEAN country supports this assertive transparency of the Philippines. Impose reputational costs, in other words, siraan, slander, the CCP, Communist Party of China, and so on. So, yan in summary. In the inset, I put there the report from CNN. CNN goes aboard a Philippine Coast Guard ship, and that is a strategy. Go aboard the Philippine Coast Guard ship or Navy ship, challenge the Chinese Coast Guard, try to invite a clash, use of water cannon, and megaphone this all over the world as China bullying. Okay, so that sets the perspective there. We move on. So we go back to the international stage again. Pros and cons in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS versus U.S. ties over the Philippines. That's the dilemma of the Philippines. So Henry Kissinger's infinitely famous quip that, quote, It is dangerous to be an enemy of America. It is fatal to be a friend of America, unquote, can be seen and felt most vividly today in Philippine economic ties with the United States, where the Philippines has been denied for years its requested free trade agreement. And now the U.S. raises its tariff on Philippine imports from an average of 6% before this year, before the Trump tariff, to 19% starting 2025. And of course, the presentation to the Filipino public is, it's 20%, it was reduced by 1% to 19%. So, but let us keep in mind, it has raised from an average of 6%, I think agricultural products was 8%, and some other products are 11%, so average going down to 6%. So, it raises tariff on Philippine imports from an average of 6% to 19% in 2025, and 100% of for its integrated circuits exports, which is 30% of Philippine exports to the United States of America, integrated circuits, with components coming from Taiwan and South Korea, assembled here and exported to the United States. 30% of our export, that is going to disappear with a 100% tariff unless there is some progress in the renegotiation of this, which is highly doubtful because America is trying to scramble to bring back industries to the American mainland. Meanwhile, taxing Filipino-American remittances to the home country. Clearly, all devastating conditions for the Philippine economy, for the Philippine exports. Now, the next one, of course, we now look at the benefits of associating with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and BRICS tandem. And this is a report, I'm sorry, malabo, no? But anyway, some of the big benefits are cited here. The development of e-commerce within BRICS states, which we see has been a very big boost for all these countries, while America is imposing this tariff war against all countries. Membership in free trade agreements, for example, the Philippines is with ASEAN in the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, and enjoys preferential tariff for exports to China, access to new markets via institutional linkages between BRICS and other international groups. Just to show the advantage of BRICS, but the next one is, of course, we will show some advantages of being with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. But before that, let me read. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization and BRICS countries gain a boon from increased trade and investments with China and other countries in the partnerships and alliances, economic alliances, benefiting from cheaper electric vehicle imports and joint ventures in processing and manufacturing raw materials to finished goods like electric vehicle batteries. The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership between China and ASEAN grants the latter tariff reductions, common rules of origin, and enhanced market access for goods and services. African exports to China are tariff-free, while imports from Latin America enjoy preferential or no tariff. Now below is a set of advantages that India saw and why it is now very active in the leadership of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. I don't know if you can sharpen the image. So the Indians, in their own discussion, have pointed out that the high-level diplomacy of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization provides a neutral platform for India-China reset, limited India-Pakistan engagement. It provides secure agenda, India's framework security, economic growth, productivity, unity, respect for sovereignty and environment. India has found that it is comfortable with the SCO conditions, counter-terrorism focus, connectivity and trade, global south leadership, cultural diplomacy. In other words, there are so many advantages of associating with the global majority multilateral institutions. Okay, next segment, let's go down. Philippines left behind in the Global Governance Initiative. The Bongbong Marcos and U.S. Filipino proxies in the 3 years of the quote-unquote Get China, Get Duterte, Get Sara campaigns imposed by the U.S. have led to a severely divided and chaotic nation, have led to the unprecedented enormity of government corruption, major debacles in tourism and export revenues, particularly with China, while levels of crime are reaching alarming levels that foreign countries have issued travel advisories against travel to the Philippines. And the national debt bloats to 7 trillion pesos while revenues shrink and new taxes and asset privatizations increase. We can show this image of cooperation among global majority countries. While the Philippines struggles with the crisis created by the unipolar strategy of the United States, global South nations emerging from centuries of Western colonization and unipolar hegemony are turning to the rising impetus for a new, just, and progressively prosperous new world order created by the Global Governance Initiative launched by China's President Xi Jinping since 2025 and now subscribed to by the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and BRICS countries, eliciting the support of the global majority that's seen in its world of forever peace. We'll have to do that part. So the basis again for the global majority cooperation in Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS, and BRICS are mutual respect among all nations based on sovereign equality, international rule of law based on the UN Charter, multilateralism, people-centered approach, and delivering real economic results. The Global Governance Initiative is joined by 3 other initiatives to be complete. The Global Development Initiative for Global Economic Growth, the Global Security Initiative to ensure the peace of the world, and the Global Civilizational Initiative to engage the major civilizations in constructive dialogue versus the Samuel Huntington's theory of clash of civilization. We bring the East and the West together, Muslim and Christians, Chinese civilization and Western civilization, Hindu civilization, together in constant dialogue to guide mankind going forward with these civilizations in constructive dialogue and continued evolution of human civilization. With this framework to guide mankind going forward, the community of shared future for humanity will be assured and Armageddon buried in the dustbin of history. For the Philippines to rise again, what must we do? Recent dramatic developments on the world stage opens the geopolitical and geo-economic gates wide open to new prospects for the Philippines. The indisputable success of the September 1 to 2, 2025 Shanghai Cooperation Organization Tianjin Summit, where India finally cast its lot with China, Russia, and 22 other member, observer, and dialogue partner countries against the tariff war of the unipolar power U.S. This was followed by the BRICS Emergency Summit called by the 2025 chairperson to discuss U.S. bullying. In the face of overwhelming support for the clear global majority for SCO and BRICS, and punctuated by China's awe-inspiring 80th anniversary of the victory of the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression, and the World Anti-Fascist War Parade, showcasing what the U.S. Foreign Policy magazine headline as China's military now leading. That's the headline from the Foreign Policy magazine, the premium U.S. Foreign Policy magazine. The U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth announced a quote-unquote shift away from China to focus on domestic hemisphere threats, unquote, a clear stand down from the quote-unquote China and Asia containment. So, this has created waves in the American press because it's a clear shift in policy. Why is the Philippines still working with the deep state of the U.S.? Now, I have to explain at this point. U.S. announced policy is not always consistent and in cadence with what is going on underneath, undercurrents, because of the deep state, but that's another issue. The Philippines should take the U.S. shift away from cross-oceanic strategy of conflict to homeland defense as an opportunity to back away from the ill-conceived quote-unquote pivot to the U.S. and restore the independent foreign policy and return to the ASEAN zone of peace, freedom, and neutrality, or ZOCFAN, and re-engage with the global majority's multilateral projects such as the SCO and BRICS, and support the global governance initiative from China to rebuild the world order based on sovereign equality, people-centered development, and in a multipolar world. The Philippines today is alienated from the great hope surging through the global south, stemming from the multilateral partnership, the SCO and BRICS, and the New World Global Governance Initiative is building. For the Philippines to recover from its crisis, it must immediately restore its independence and sovereignty to refocus on building national unity and purpose, cleanse society of corruption, rejoin the community of free nations, and unite with the global majority, building a brave, new, just, and progressive country and world. So that's the situation of the Philippines relative to global development. And a very short statement that summarizes our policy advice to the government and to the Filipino nation. I'll just read this formally, but you can access this also in our website. September 12, 2025, SCO BRICS Global Governance Initiative Pact for Philippine Recovery. The Philippines today is facing an unprecedented crisis, national fragmentation, unparalleled levels of corruption in high national executive and legislative places, a state of national economic and financial collapse that is unequal, brought about by crashing export prospects, tourism revenues, and overseas remittances under U.S. tax pressures, and real estate market crashing, all brought about by Marcos compliance with the unipolar U.S. strategy of get China, get Duterte, get Sana, stoking the South China Sea tensions, using massive budget insertions, bribes for Sara slander and impeachment, and the abduction of Rodrigo Duterte to the ICC. What needs to be done to survive and surmount the present crisis? The unambiguous answer is simple. The Philippines should immediately abandon the unholy compliance with the unipolar ambitions of the United States and its containment of China and Asia strategy. Immediately abandon the acceptance of the U.S. military bases, missiles, and war industries. Restore the Philippine Constitution's independent foreign policy and comply with ASEAN neutrality, and resume engagement with the global majorities project to build a just and progressive multipolar world. Only then will the Philippines thrive with sovereignty and freedom to engage in trade and commerce with all nations. Recent dramatic developments on the world stage opens the geopolitical and geoeconomic gates wide to new prospects of the Philippines. First, the indisputable success of the September 1 to 2, 2025 Shanghai Cooperation Organization Engine Summit, where India finally casts its lot with China, Russia, and 22 other countries, member, observer, and dialogue partner countries against the tariff war of the new unipolar power US. This was followed by a BRICS Emergency Summit called by 2025 Chair of Brazil to discuss US bullying. The overwhelming support for the clear global majority of the from the clear global majority for SCO and BRICS, which was punctuated by China's awe-inspiring 80th anniversary of the victory of the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression, and the World Anti-Fascist War parade showcased what the U.S. Foreign Policy magazine headlined as quote-unquote China's military now leading. The U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth announced a quote-unquote shift away from China to focus on domestic hemisphere threats, a clear stand down from the China and Asia containment strategy. The U.S. shift away from cross-oceanic strategy of tension and conflict to homeland defense is an opportunity for the Philippines to back away from the ill-conceived pivot to the U.S. Now is the time to restore the independent foreign policy and return to the ASEAN zone of peace, freedom, and neutrality, drop PAM, and re-engage the global majorities multilateral projects such as the SCO, BRICS, and other multilateral cooperation. Now is the time to support the global governance initiative of China to rebuild the world order based on sovereign equality, people-centered development, and the multipolar world. So that ends my role for today's presentation. I will be open for questions later on after we listen to the presentation from our moderator has just arrived.